for this final lesson of this real basic journey, but an important one is to learn how to not only bring a picture in, but then some of those fun tools that you can use to manipulate that picture. And this is where some of the stuff that we've looked at so far really starts to come together. So for instance, why layers are important, what certain tools do, all that kind of stuff. So you'll need a picture. Again, you might want to use that headshot I instructed you to have, or you can use any picture, but I'm going to use a headshot of myself. So to install or to upload that picture, to open it, you could just open it as a new picture. Like you can go to File, Open, and then choose that picture. And notice it won't go on that layer you might already have, which in my case was that one I used from the last tutorial. If you want to put it on that layer, you can just left click this. Yours might have been locked, by the way. Like if you saw this little lock, you can just unlock it by clicking that lock. You can left click the layer and you drag it, you hold on to it, hold on, hover over that other layer and you drop it in. Notice it's huge compared to what my kind of palette was before. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to jump into basically opening a new picture. I will say this though, it's really important that you have a high resolution picture. And if you did this with a digital SLR or something like that, even a phone these days, you should have pretty high resolution. If you go online and just like download any old picture offline, it might not be that great. To check the resolution, because they'll all kind of look the same here, you can go up to Image, Image Size, and you'll see this is 18.56 inches by 12.373 inches, which is large, right? But you could also go to pixels, and you can see that this is like 5,500 by 3,700 pixels. That's huge, right? A typical HD, picture would be 1920 by 1080 pixels. So this is really big. So that's cool. We've got a good high quality picture here. So let's jump around to some things that we can do on this picture right away that we've learned how to do. So of course we can use our selection tools. Let's in this case use the lasso tool, and you can do this. And this is where you start to maybe understand like, oh, that's why you would do this. Let's say I wanted to move this eye. I don't know why, but I can move this eye over here. Okay. I could also Control Z. I could actually duplicate this eyeball, so I have 3 eyeballs. So once you have that eyeball selected, there's several things you can do. One of those is you could actually duplicate it, and here's a fun quick trick to do that. If you do Control J on your keyboard, it will duplicate whatever was selected. So check this out. On layer number 1 now, notice there's 2 layers. Control J makes a new layer, duplicates it. I actually just have the eyeball now, which is kind of fun. And that eyeball now I can do stuff with. So if I'm on layer 1, and I'm going to rename it. You always want to rename your layers. I'm going to call that the eyeball layer. This layer is just headshot layer. Okay, on my eyeball layer, if I use my move tool, I can actually move this around. And notice now I have like 3 eyeballs. And so what I can actually do is, whatever I want with that eyeball. I can move it around. I can do all sorts of kind of fun stuff with it. So one of the first things I'm actually going to teach you, which is fun, is in the first overview, we talked about how to look through the picture, right? To look through multiple layers, you could erase using your eraser tool. And I could do that here, right? I could erase the edges here. And I can actually do a pretty good job probably of like getting to the edges of that eyeball if I really zoom in and take my time and all that stuff. That's one option. But let's delete that and say, or let's undo that and say, no, that's not the option I want. Here's a really cool thing. And this is going to like be your bread and butter. So get ready for it. This is one of the key things you want to know with Photoshop. And that is how to use a mask. So at the bottom here, where you have your new layer, you also have this over here called a mask tool. Now, if I left click that mask tool, you will see this white box appear, and you'll notice it's on that same layer. What that box is letting me do is actually like dissolve what's on that layer and look through to the next layer. And to do that, we have to use a tool here using our brush tool. So we'll go down to our brush tool, and here's the key thing. We're going to use black to reveal what's below it. So if I start painting with black, notice it's doing kind of the same thing as that eraser tool, but here's the cool thing. it's not actually deleting this image, the eyeball image. So, and I'll prove it to you. If I click my eyeball off here, if I right click it, I can disable the layer mask. And notice I'm just saying don't do what this layer mask is doing. That's what the disable effect means, right? So just don't do what this mask is doing. And you can see that image is totally fine. It's totally functional. So you might say, okay, well, this is like an eyeball layer. Why would I do that? Okay, so let's enable the layer mask. And now let's actually, I have it painted in black, and this is what it looks like. I just painted all this black around it. And if you want to see what it looks like, you hold down Alt and click on your mask, and you can see what you've done. Now, instead of all that harsh black, let's use white to conceal it. So I'm going to paint that all white, just so you kind of see what I'm doing. And now notice that is all back. All of that picture is back. Let's instead use a soft, round brush. And this is why those soft ones help a lot. Let's use black again. And I'm going to paint, make sure you're always on your mask. What inevitably you're going to do from time to time, I do it still, is you forget you're on this and you'll do this and you'll be like, why is it painting black? And it's because you're painting on the actual image layer. So if we undo all that using Control Z, our best friend, then what I can do is go to the mask layer. And if I just click here, whoops, with black, make sure your black is your front chip. Notice it starts to like softly go away. I'm going to zoom in using Alt. Sorry you get to see my face up that close. But I'm going to zoom in using Alt, and I can really get in here. And I'm just kind of holding down my left button on my mouse, and I'm just going kind of back and forth really lightly, so that I can see this. And now check it out. Okay, pretty creepy, right? And again, what that did, if I hold down Alt, I can see my mask. That's what I was doing there. And notice that really soft edge allows us to blend it much more convincingly here. So I can then actually move this around, and notice the mask stays with it, which is cool. This is my move tool, right? Move tool up here. And I can move that and be like, where do I want to put this eye? And that's a really cool tool. And honestly, the mask tool is something you're going to use all the time. So it's really important that you figure that one out early on and you get really comfortable with it. The rhyme, of course, again, is black reveals, white conceals. Let me give you a little bit more intense of an example of that. So I'm going to go File, Open, and I'm going to grab this picture of me with a mask. Sorry to bring back these lovely memories of the pandemic, but you know, when making tutorials. Okay, I'm going to left click and drag this file over to this one. I'm going to drop it on. And notice this is a smaller resolution file, but it's still good. It'll still work for what we're trying to do here. Okay, I'm going to try to line these up. And one way you can try to line these up is each layer is set automatically at 100% opacity, meaning it's fully colored. It's got the full color range to it. So if I go up to this little guy over here and I say, let's drop this opacity. Notice I can kind of now see through that layer. That's really helpful if you're ever trying to merge two faces, because I can start to line up things that I want to line up. So in this case, I want to line up my eyes. And you'll notice it's not quite working right. So what I can do to transform this top layer is I can use a Control T adjustment. So if I do Control T on my keyboard, notice I get these little adjusting kind of boxes. That's always your universal like adjustment look. And I can now take these and try to squeeze this together a little bit more. And you might be like, well, that's too bad. Like you can't seem to land on them. And that's okay. Let's rotate my head a little bit more. Let's try to squeeze it a little bit more, move it over. That's actually pretty good. I mean, it is my own head on my own head. So, but that's pretty good. And I don't want to distort things too much. So I'm going to go with like this. Okay. Very cool. I have that. I'm going to increase my opacity. And I'm actually going to dump it to the bottom layer. So this is my, it's a mask layer for a mask layer. That's my mask layer. I'm going to dump it to the bottom one. And I want to put the mask on this picture of me. So if I zoom in, what I could do, again, you know this now, I could use the eraser tool and I could go like this. And I could be like, haha, isn't that clever? I've put a mask on myself. But honestly, not super convincing, right? And you're like, well, I could get in there closer for sure, and you could totally do that. But it's still not going to be super convincing. So this is where your mask is actually going to help a lot. I went back too far. Okay, there we go. You're going to do, again, on the top layer. Remember, you're always looking through from the top with layers. You're going to use this egg on a plate. That's how I'll always refer to it, as the mask. Egg on a plate. I'm going to use black to reveal. I'm going to make sure my brush is the soft brush, soft round. And I'm going to drop my opacity on my brush down a little bit so it's not quite as strong. And I want to reveal what's underneath. So check this out. Let's start. So check this out. I'm going to start painting. Ooh, fun. And you'll notice it comes in kind of like softly because I dropped that opacity a little bit. And then here's what you can do, right? You can zoom in and I can try to do this more precisely. And I can get right to the edges of where I want. So I want to get this mask right on my face. And really tuck it in there, right? So I want to make this a convincing looking mask of a mask. Now, when I get to these edges, right, I want to make sure this is convincing. And right now, this doesn't look right. So what I can do is use white, right? I can flip these chips, and I can start to drag that back. And you might say, Mr. Faulkner, that does not still look very convincing. And I'd be like, yeah, I think you're right. So let's flip these chips back, and let's actually get that black back. And here's where it all pays off, sports fans. If you remember, we have our selection tools. We're going to use our lasso tool, and there's actually a better tool to use than this, but I'm going to, like, kind of as well as I can freehand this. There we go. That wasn't bad. Not bad. And I'm going to make sure I'm on my mask tool. I'm going to use black. I'm going to go back to my brush, and check this out. Remember, one of the concepts we went over is that you can only brush inside the selected area. So if I brush out here, nothing's happening. You'll notice nothing like appears on that mask. Nothing's happening. I'm pushing, I swear I'm pushing it. But down here now, I'm just holding on left, and then notice it's actually cutting through. I want the opposite of that. I want white. I want to get rid of it. And notice I'm really getting now an edge there. And I actually have too much of an edge. It's bleeding through it because I went kind of overboard there. Now, here's the judgment you have to make, right? Like, does this look more or less real? To me, that looks worse. And there's a lot of things you can do. We won't get too far into it. You can like feather the edge and all that stuff. So what I would generally do is say, look, I think it actually looks better if we do kind of just a subtle fade on the edge here. I'm going to drop my opacity maybe all the way down to like 30. And I'm just going to do a really soft fade here on the edge. So it gives that illusion that there's an edge. But I don't mind if it's like a softer kind of edge thing going on, okay? And when you zoom out, you're not really going to notice that. We need to get rid of that edge completely here. There we go. And then we can, of course, flop back and kind of add a little back in there, just being mindful of that complete edge. Thinking that, of course, the bokeh is causing that to not be seen as well. So again, there you go. So let's disable this. So remember, Alt and left click over the mask lets you see what's there. So that's what I did. That's what I painted, basically. And that's why that brush tool is really important. And then I can also right click and say, let's disable that mask. And that was the original image, right? But now let's enable it, and that's what I put on. So right away here, you're seeing that with masks, with the brush tool, with some selection tools, you can kind of quickly start manipulating images where, you know, if you showed this to someone, obviously if they look at it for a while, they're like, something doesn't look right, right? But most people, if they're glancing at that, they're going to be like, oh, Mr. Faulkner with a mask on. Like, that works. That makes sense. So what you want to take away from this lesson is with two pictures, you can start to combine them using masks. Just imagine now, if you have many layers, how those masks can start to affect many different layers, right? So that's where we're going to be kind of building toward. This little process right here takes some time. So work with it, start playing around with it, start trying some stuff for yourself. This, by the way, has saved so many family photos that we've done where, you know, maybe one of the little kiddos wasn't smiling, but they smiled in another one. And you can literally select their smile and move it to the other one. So great stuff. It helps out a ton. This is really basic mask stuff right here. There's so much more to learn, and we will do that in future videos.